All right, guys. So welcome back to the show. I have a good guest, former client, and really good friend of mine, Megan Valentine, here with me today. This is actually, I'm just going to be honest, this is actually our second time filming this episode because we did it like a week or two ago, and then I messed something up and wasn't able to save the file. And it's too bad because it was such a damn good episode because she has such a great story in terms of like her transition into corporate work and then her experience there being basically like a computer programmer. And then now her transition out of the corporate world into living more of kind of like a off-grid slash semi-off-grid lifestyle. And I thought her story was very interesting and could definitely help a lot of people with the transition as well. So again, my fault for messing up and not saving the last episode. We'll make sure to do it right this time around. Thankfully, Megan is a patient person and is willing to do it again and share her story. So I'm thankful for that. So welcome back, Megan.
Anything for you, Eugene.
Yeah, thanks for doing this again. I actually find her story very interesting because I'm also a lot of people don't know, but I actually was raised by my grandma on an off-grid farm in Ukraine. And I'm kind of slowly actually taking steps to moving into like a semi-off-grid style of living as well. So Megan kind of resonates with that really well. So I invited her on. She used to be a client of mine many years ago as well. And she made like an amazing transformation. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, et cetera, et cetera. So welcome back, Megan. Thanks for doing this again. I guess one thing we can start with is really quick, for a lot of listeners who don't know, we also went to the same school together. So we went to the University of California, Irvine. I was in the cog sci department and she was in the computer science department, which are departments like really close together. They're basically like shoulder to shoulder
Actually,
with one
computer
another.
engineering.
Or is computer science and engineering different?
Yep.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay. Damn, learning new stuff every day. I thought they're like just this kind of like a phrase that was different phrase, but meant the same exact kind of thing, like synonymous.
But yeah, I actually took like several classes like within the computer science department too, and then ended up like veering more towards computer engineering to get like a little bit more of a hardware perspective as well.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and for the podcast, like for the first half of the year, I really wanted to focus on how big of an impact choosing the right environment makes on your mental and physical health. And I wanted to make that the focus of a lot of my guests on the first half of the year, because I do see, a lot of people, they do different diets. They do like keto, the carnivore diet, fasting, whatever. They do this workout, this boot camp here, CrossFit there, et cetera, et cetera. But you kind of honestly, in the grand scheme of things, rarely see like lasting change with people. And what I mean by that is like simple terms, it's like, let's say a person loses the unwanted weight they want to lose, and then it actually stays off indefinitely for the rest of their life. Yes, they might gain, like a pound here or a pound there. It's really insignificant at that point, but they don't like lose 30 or 40 pounds and then kind of regain those 30 or 40 pounds. If anything, regain 5 more pounds 2 or 3 years down the line, which generally like 80 to 90% of people that end up losing the weight end up happening. They always kind of regain their weight. And I feel it's the same thing with various health issues. It could be high blood pressure, high cholesterol, anxiety, depression, whatever, you name it. It's like a myriad of health issues. And I feel like a lot of times, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why this happens, but one of the biggest reasons is people kind of fail to change their environment that kind of led to those issues, whatever the issues may be to begin with, and moreover, change the belief system that led them to believe it's acceptable to be in that environment that, like, for example, doesn't facilitate health conscious choices, doesn't facilitate a work-life balance, et cetera, et cetera. So I figured I would invite you as a guest because you're a great example of being able to live in multiple worlds and see the difference, and also actually making that transformation yourself and creating that lasting change with yourself also. So before
yeah, I think like the world like we live in like kind of just like wants us to like fall into like these patterns, you know, and it, like, especially like to not to just like only bash on the corporate world, because that's not the only like problem out there, but it like one of those things where it doesn't want you to change because it wants to like use you as a tool, and it doesn't like care about like your feelings, your family, like whether you're taking care of yourself. And I think that kind of like hurts you as like a person as far as like your mental health. And yeah, like I agree with like so much of what you say. Like it's just like we fall back into like just, you know, like you can like push and like get through like a change for a little bit, and then all of a sudden all these like old habits like start creeping back in. And again, why did those old habits start creeping back in? Like there's an exact reason for it, and it's because like that's the life that's kind of like been, or that you're like choosing to lead, like based off of like what some of our preconceived notions are.
Yeah, and I feel a lot of times, and I want to kind of get to know the story about like why you got into computer science, et cetera, in that field. And but a lot of times I feel like, you know, some people return, you know, they regain their weight, or their health problems come back, and they always kind of are in the mindset of like, oh, I just need to be more disciplined, or I need this and that. But it's not true. I really feel for a lot of people, it's not a discipline issue. It's just the environment they're in
Mhm.
makes it like, just the environment they're in makes it basically like extremely difficult for them to maintain their mental and physical health, even when their intention is to do that. It's just they're playing on a setting that's like very, very difficult, and it's just not sustainable. So so yeah, that's where I wanted to kind of touch into, you know, your background, and what kind of changes you saw. So before we begin, um, what do you let's start with like what even got you into like computer science at UCI, and all that stuff, just to kind of get some backstory.
Yeah. So, well, my dad's a computer programmer, which was like where kind of my initial like interest came from. Also, like video games, and I kind of like wanted to be a video game designer for the longest time. I never ended up actually doing that because my specialty ended up being like with firmware, and specifically like working on hard drives. Um, but I really like enjoy the problem, or enjoy the challenges of problem solving and like fixing things. And so that's what kind of got me into that area. I'd have to say, like I was always like kind of like I might have been the captain of the cheerleading squad in high school, but I was also like still like a total like nerd at the same time. You know, it's like I kind of had like both facets like to my personality. I liked to be like very gregarious, but also at the same time, like I was like a smart kid. Mm, I liked being a programmer. I liked solving problems. I liked finding out things that, you know, I didn't think like anybody else would be able to solve. And like I would try to like solve new problems. And I loved math. Like, and actually like to this day, like I'm still like very, very passionate about math. Like I kind of like one of like my side things that I like to do for fun is I work on math problems with my dad, and like try to like come up with like various like solutions and proofs. So like there's like a little bit of like nerd at heart for me.
Gotcha. Well, did you were the classes like very interesting for you? And did you notice like any like red flags in terms of like, oh, maybe this field isn't right for me during school? Because I find like honestly, like a lot of times I found a lot of the classes I took at UCI were like very interesting, like the classwork itself. But then when you look at kind of the application and industry of that classwork, it didn't become like that interesting. I don't know what your take is on that.
So there were like a couple red flags for me. And like one of them is like speaking as like a female, like in a very male dominated industry. But I had this like one professor, and it's like I had some of the highest test scores in my class, and he like constantly just like questioned me like way more than the other students, and it just like kind of like crossed like the level of like getting inappropriate. So that was like a red flag. And then it might have been like a red flag I should have paid a little bit more attention to, because I also ended up like dealing with some of that in like the workplace. And then the other red flag too was there was already kind of like the sense of working harder on something than everybody else.
Mhm.
And so it's like, you know, you have like students like staying up until like 3 or 4 in the morning, like several nights a week. And it's like, is that really healthy? And then again, that ended up translating into work life where, you know, like you're only treated as a good employee if you're literally giving every single thing that you have to it, and basically not taking the time to take care of yourself. And that, like, to me is just like wrong. But that I kind of started to see like even like when I was in school, and it had nothing to do with like the amount of like interesting problems in class that like I would receive, but you could kind of already like see like this like shift in mentality.
Yeah, I do find that kind of mentality is in a lot of fields, but especially in the corporate world, where it's like if you're not dying for your job, you're not kind of doing your job uh, type of mindset. And I find like a lot of times, especially in college, especially when uh, probably we're finishing. When did you graduate from UCI again?
So I graduated 2009.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. We graduated exactly at the same year. So yeah, as
Yeah.
you remember, we're graduating kind of towards the tail end of that like mortgage industry collapse, and it kind of
Yeah.
hurt the economy overall. And it made at least a lot of my grad friends that I was graduating UCI with kind of really worried about their job prospects in the future. And I find just a lot of people were at least at that time like in a very scarcity mindset, and they're always kind of just looking at basically what kind of salary they can earn from a specific job, or what kind of title or prestige they can earn from that job, but never really evaluating or taking into consideration the cost of earning that salary. Because that's, I feel, just a lot of, especially college students, just don't even take into consideration like, what is it costing me to actually earn this salary, to have this job, et cetera, et cetera. And the cost could be like immense, like far more costly than the actual paycheck they earn from that job, believe it or not. But
Yeah,
oftentimes
it
they
could
just,
your health.
yeah, but oftentimes they don't kind of realize it until many, many years later, or some just don't realize it at all. And they're always chasing symptom after symptom. If it's anxiety today, it's depression tomorrow, or anger issues, or gut issues, or whatever.
Oh yeah,
And I,
completely. And like in the case of like my story, you know, it's like I did go out into like that job workforce like with that kind of mentality. And you know, like I am more prone to anxiety, like because of like my personality. Like that's just who I am. Like I've always been like a super type A like personality. So like I like to have things just so, and I get like anxious if they aren't. And um like my job like ended up like causing me just like massive and massive and massive amounts of anxiety, you know, which like did end up like, you know, translating into like bills to like go see the doctor. And, you know, like I have like no shame about that, because like I've now like worked really hard towards, you know, like removing like those negative aspects like from my life, you know, but I'm like living proof that even if you are like a more prone to anxiety type person, like you can put yourself in a better environment. You can like remove yourself from that sort of thing, and you can find yourself in a better place.
Yeah, exactly. And I shared this story with you already many times. I'm also like prone to anxiety myself and had actually like pretty terrible social anxiety like in the past. And it was definitely not an easy journey to do it the way I did it, but I didn't take the, um, I went to just like anyone, I went to the doctor initially and all they wanted to do was just prescribe anti-anxiety medications. Although I didn't know too much about it way back then, I kind of like something in the back of my head told me that just wasn't the right path or wouldn't produce like a lasting change or resolution to the issue. Because it just kind of seemed like a very symptom management approach just right off the bat. And although it wasn't easy and it took many years, just by changing my environment, kind of like you mentioned, having just a lot less stress triggers or taking on a lot less work during the week, taking improv classes, acting classes, et cetera, and just forcing myself to be more
Yeah.
social. Just over time, that social anxiety just kind of disappeared as I started kind of attending to all these other kind of like holistic approaches to anxiety and just kind of like disappeared for the most part. But regarding
Yeah,
regarding
it's like the more like behavioral treatment, like sort of approach to it rather than like just putting yourself like on a medication. And like I actually like did go the medication route for a while, but then eventually like it turned out that the medication like wasn't enough and I was still having anxiety. And
Mhm.
so at that point, like I was like, well, what else do I need to change? And that's like when like a few people like came into my life, that were like very anti like medication, like as far as like treating anxiety, and like basically like expressed to me like things like, you actually like have to make changes in your life like if you really want to remove anxiety.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that was like one of like the first like catalysts like in me like overcoming like that first like hurdle like towards like better like health. And I think um it's like so easy like when it comes to like our body in some ways to like see like when we're being unhealthy. It's like, okay, like you're on diabetes medication or blood pressure medication, but when it comes to like your mind, it's like a lot harder to see like that you might be making unhealthy choices that might be like leading to the symptoms that you're having. And like a lot of times like I've been doing like a lot of like reading like more about like primitive man. It's like there are reasons why like we have anxiety, and a lot of it has to do with like survival, but how that's translated like into the modern world just has like kind of got like wires crossed, you know like where like now things that like where it's like, oh well, I have to be the best at my job, like I have to do this, I have to like be like the best at everything, like has kind of like crossed wires with like all those things that were literally like just developed like for us to keep ourselves alive primitively.
Well, let's take a quick step back because I want to know your progression through the corporate world. So let's kind of you graduated from UCI. Did you were you already working while at UCI, or did you start working already after you graduated?
I started working immediately after I graduated.
So let's kind of go down the timeline because I'm pretty sure kind of like all the red flags didn't become so obvious in the beginning. Most of the time, people actually like, from my experience, like enjoy their work tremendously like the first year or two, but then the hustle and bustle and the grind of corporate world kind of wears them down pretty quickly after that. So let's start with like year one. How did your first year at work go?
First year, I loved like how in demand my job was. I loved like it's like I want to I always call it like it's like you get a gold star and a cookie for like every like good thing you do.
Hmm.
And it was like I was enjoying that. Like I was enjoying the praise. I was enjoying all the credit I was getting for all the things that I was doing. And I worked myself to the bone. But at the same time, yes, like I was enjoying it.
And how
Well,
did it progress from
still
there?
did take like a lot of time though, like I will say, like to, how like I love like hiking, like doing all that stuff. Like I still would make time like pretty much at least like every other weekend to go climb like a big peak.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like during the week, I would be basically like getting the point like where I was like sleeping 5 hours a night so that I could like work as many hours as I was and like still try to eat healthy.
How is the environment with like your coworkers and all that stuff?
So with the first group that I worked with, I would work with all of those people again. Like that first group I worked with were great people, positive people. I think they really loved me because I was picking up for a lot of the slack that was going on within that department. And so yeah, it was like it, that first year, like my relationship with my coworkers was really good.
Gotcha. And how did it progress from there?
So as I continued to get promotions, I just seemed to start working with unhealthier and unhealthier people. I was just working with like people that were not happy.
Hmm.
Like you could tell they weren't happy with their lives. And so it kind of like started to like rub me the wrong way. And again, like as a female, it felt like sometimes in my industry at least, like because there are like way less women working. Like I've only ever had the opportunity of working with one other woman on the same team as me. That like I had to like fight twice as hard for my voice ever to be heard. Like even when
Hmm.
I knew I was completely right. And there was something about that too that like just did not sit really well with me because it's like I'm giving you all this data. I can show you I'm right. So why do I like need to press this issue? If so and so had presented this idea, like, say another person on the team, like you wouldn't even be asking for proof. So that was like one of like the areas where things like first started to get like really, really frustrating. And I could also tell that the people I worked with were incredibly frustrated because I also got transferred into a group during a really difficult time, like at the company, where everybody was required to also work Saturdays.
Hmm.
So we were working Monday through Saturday, only day off was Sunday, and everybody was miserable.
Yeah, I find it unfortunate that it is kind of like an environment that doesn't facilitate health conscious choices. And like I always say, sick people can't make healthy decisions. And unfortunately, a lot of times just the leadership is already like mentally and physically sick themselves and aren't even consciously aware that that's the case because standards for mental and physical health has dropped so low that oftentimes, like I actually run into people many times that are like, I'm eating healthy, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I have them fill out like an HEQ health assessment questionnaire. And I mean, in short, they're basically like in the red in pretty much like every single category. They have like gut issues, they have high anxiety, depression, anger issues. They're showing up like super angry to work all the time. And for them,
Yeah.
that's like, this is like totally normal. And
Yeah.
unfortunately,
That was
it's,
like that was my standard actually, was being around angry people all the time because they didn't have time off.
yeah. And unfortunately, it's like when they get into leadership positions, also, they just once again further impose this type of like philosophy on their
Mhm.
employees. And a lot of times it's kind of, I hate to say it's not their fault because I feel it is still their fault, but a little bit it's not because their upper management is also like that, you know? And it's just kind of like
Yeah,
a like a
I think it's like just like a systemic problem, you
exactly.
know?
Exactly.
Like,
It is a systemic problem, and it's kind of like it establishes this environment and swamp of like mental and physical pathology that is like normalized to the point of people aren't even consciously aware that it's not even normal anymore. I mean, maybe in the back of their head, they're always kind of like questioning, like, oh, I don't feel well, especially when you get into your 30s and 40s, it really starts to become more and more obvious that you're just like that chronic fatigue, that short temperedness, the gut issue is just not normal. And there's signs of just like pathology or symptoms of pathology going on, et cetera, et cetera. And and unfortunately, it's just kind of once again normalized. Like I had a computer science client, very, very smart and bright uh, female from China that was working at a big computer firm in the US. And whenever she would come, this is way back in the day when I was still doing in-person training. And whenever she would come down for her training session on her lunch hour, she would be getting messages like from her boss, kind of guilt tripping her into like, oh, like the team is waiting for you to finish this one thing so we can kind of move on. And remember, it's her lunch hour as well. The team is waiting for you
yeah.
so you can finish this one thing so we can move on. And it's basically kind of like hinting like, oh, it's your fault that we now have to wait for you because you're not working on your lunch hour and you're
Yeah,
over
well, and
there
I mean,
taking
I would get those even when I was like training with you, and I was just like, I'm sorry, my phone is off right now. This
Yeah,
is my
I
time.
just have it off, period. That's why I always tell my clients, hey, always have your phone off, especially if if your work is related to your phone, or preferably don't even carry it in the gym. Like I just have a stopwatch most of the time for the timer in
Yeah,
between
and
sets.
actually, like, I like look at like my husband, like he is honestly like one of the most like mentally like healthy people like I've ever seen. And I think like part of it is because up until like maybe just like a few months ago, he has only ever had a flip phone.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a smart
And
move. If you can get away with
and
it. So
when he gets messages on his phone, the only ones that he ever answers are if like I have something to say about the baby. Like
mhm.
other than that, it's just like radio silence on his end. He doesn't want anybody to know that he can possibly get messages. Like he does not believe in Facebook, like social media, like in I just like I think like he has such a healthy attitude about it.
Yeah.
And then like another like short like little anecdote too is so my dad, he has type 2 diabetes, and he'll be like the first like person to admit that he was like the cause of like his type 2 diabetes. But like one of the things that like makes me proudest of him is that like once he realized like what kind of a toll like work was taking on him like physically, and that it was like causing him to like stress eat, he took a
Mhm.
step back and he he had been in upper management before, and he took like a role like as like a lower manager because he wanted to like focus on his physical health. And he went from like being insulin dependent to like being or insulin dependent to being like not requiring any insulin like within a month. And he has remained that way since. And like now he's retired and he's just like done like with all that BS, you know. It like it makes me like really proud of him, like that, he was able to like on his own like recognize and like see like the type of like environment. And like he's like I said, he's also like a computer scientist, like what like the pressure and the environment was like doing to his body.
Yeah. And I find like I do,
It-
as you know, I have a lot of computer science friends, and I think they're like so fun to hang out with. And it's not the field. that there's anything wrong with. You could be like a very healthy computer programmer, whatever, but it's just unfortunately, it's the way the corporate culture makes people kind of carry out that passion, because a lot of times people are like, well, I hear people say, well, like for our example here for the conversation, they're like, well, programming is my passion, I love doing it. And I'm like, well, that's great, that's the first step on identifying your core values and then living true to them. But remember, it's not enough to like find your passion. The next bigger step and the next like bigger challenge actually is finding an environment that lets you express that passion to your
Yeah.
individual uniqueness. And like good luck doing that in like a corporate culture, which is like extremely like rigid, bureaucratic. Remember, you're there to kind of mold into their system. They're not there to mold around your system and core values and needs. And an important thing to remember is that nature is a novelty generator. There's no like literally two of anything. Even on the same exact tree, each individual leaf is different on the same exact tree. Each droplet of
Yeah.
water, each snowflake is different. It's the same exact thing with people as well. I mean, each individual person is different. Even those little differences are actually very, very important when especially when you're doing work for like 8 to 10 hours a day, for example, which kind of the corporate environment kind of forces you into that kind of model. Because if you don't get that right, what ends up happening is kind of what you hinted at in the beginning is, for the first year or two, it's really cool. That salary is great. The prestigious title is great as well.
Yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
you're getting like that constant like good feedback, like where like you're appreciated. I always call it like you get a gold star and a cookie,
mhm.
and like they draw you in that way, like where you just like are constantly chasing after like getting another cookie.
Yeah, exactly. But then, after 2 years, the typical symptom is like, you're showing up to work, you're like, oh, I wish I could be like, for example, doing this type of programming under these conditions, but no, I have to do this project and deal with this kind of uh maybe there's always like a coworker or two that you don't get along with. Obviously, the social dynamics of any kind of corporate environment are always like very tough, because I feel oftentimes, first and foremost, it is like a pyramid system, basically. And second, it always kind of puts you into this kind of like forever childish type of state. Like, for example, as we're growing up, we
Yeah,
obviously have
forever
like a,
you're seeking like daddy's approval.
yeah, exactly. As we're growing up, we obviously have like our parents, and we look at them, especially when we're very small, as like demigods. They have all the answers, they're the protectors, et cetera, et cetera. And what ends up happening oftentimes when you get into like a corporate environment is you just switch out your biological dad, and your boss or your upper management becomes your new dad. And
Yep.
look at the roles. I mean, they're very, very similar. I mean, look, when you're very small, you have to, ask your dad for permission to hang out with your friends on the weekend. Just like you have to ask your
Yeah.
boss for permission to take your 2 weeks off or go out, have a wedding day or
Mhm.
whatever. And then also the same thing with like, um, you have to do your chores as a kid, or get like a certain amount of respectable amount of grades in school for your dad to give you allowance. Well, you look at the corporate environment, it's like the same exact thing. You have to turn in your projects on time with the appropriate amount of quality in order to get your AK paycheck, aka allowance, so that you can kind of go buy stuff. So it kind of keeps the adult in like a forever childhood state, and then they kind of unfortunately teach their kids to do exactly the same exact thing. That's why you see oftentimes kids getting into the same exact occupation and roles as their parents, although their parents themselves didn't enjoy those roles to begin with. They kind of indirectly tell their kids to do it by showing them that it is acceptable and okay to be like miserable at work, to not have healthy boundaries, to let yourself go like physically and mentally for your job. Uh, all these things don't have to be communicated verbally with the child. The child already picks this up through visual observation, which is far more powerful oftentimes and potent than actual verbal communication. And then also like the other aspect is that you have the sibling rivalry which you have also in the corporate world. So it's like you're
Oh,
always
yeah, definitely.
You can probably go into this in a lot more detail, but you always uh, everyone's always trying to impress their manager for that next promotion, like, oh, I got to look better than Megan, so I get promoted, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same thing all the way up. And it creates this like rivalry between the coworkers, basically, indirectly, oftentimes, which also cause like a lot of insidious stress in that kind of environment, because at the same time, you're supposed to be on the same team. But on the other hand, it's kind of like you need that job security as well. And it's a little bit scary because um, one of the biggest negatives I feel that kept me out of corporate work is towards the end when I was graduating, around the year you're graduating. I was already doing coaching like very, very part-time. I was like 10 hours or 15 hours a week. It wasn't a big deal, but I was coaching uh, a lot of the people that I was coaching were like managers or district managers or whatever, executives. And they're already like 35 or 40 plus, and they just weren't doing like well, like physically or mentally. And I'm like, man, I can't have, it's just too stressful to have, first of all, just one person dictate your entire future. And if they don't like you or they're going through a divorce and it's not a bad timing, that could have a ripple effect on your whole entire career. But then on top of that, it's just the person's not doing well at all. And they're in charge of you, your future, your well-being, your pay, what type of projects you get. And that's just like way too like frightening and scary for me personally. And I don't know what your take is on that, or if you had any kind of experience with that.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like I had one situation with like a manager where, he gave me what he called a stretch goal, to apply for at least like one patent. And he had already rated me negatively on my review before I even went into the review meeting. And I'm like, I applied for 4 patents like during this review time. But it's like he was already ready to like rate me negatively. Like I
Hmm.
could already tell like that this person did not like me for whatever reason. I have like my suspicions. Like I think he was sexist. But like it was like incredibly stressful working for him
Hmm.
because it was just like I feel like this is somebody who wanted to set me up for failure. And unfortunately, it was like this was my manager, and he just was like this angry, like little man, like kind of like running around, just in charge of all these people, just making all these decisions about all of our careers. And you could tell he was not happy, like with his own life.
Hmm.
And like I hope, like since then, he's found his happiness, but it's just like to have somebody like that involved like with choices in your career, it's hard
Yeah, and
because you can like go well above like their expectations, and yet they're still going to try to like set you up for failure.
yeah, and at the end of the day, they might be great people as well, but you don't know like what's going on in their life. Like some maybe unfortunately, just you're under their watch while they're going through like a terrible divorce or something like that, or maybe one of their family
Exactly.
members is fighting through cancer and that's impacting their judgment, which is gonna 100% have an impact on your career. It could be a huge impact on your career
Your
for your
life.
entire career, not just that moment. It
Yeah.
could kind of be one of those anchors that holds you back for the rest of your 20, 30, or 40-year career. And going back a little bit, there are some people that are going to be listening to this and they're like, oh, Eugene, like, what are you talking about? Like everyone's unhealthy in corporate. And I'll just confidently say I have done corporate lectures, corporate health lectures many times before. I've trained many, many corporate workers, had many of them fill out, hundreds of them fill out HAQ scores, done studying on this subject. And I can confidently say that at least, like 8 to 9 out of 10 people in a corporate environment are full of obesity and disease, full of mental and physical pain. Can objectively prove that through the hundreds of HAQs I've had fill out in various corporate occupations throughout throughout different fields. And there have been also, you can go to PubMed.gov, and there are many studies on metabolic health showing that at least 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unhealthy now. Okay, so just, and you know what, you don't even need to take my word for it. Like literally step outside anywhere in America these days, or particularly in regards to our conversation here, any corporate office, and 9 out of 10, literally 9 out of 10 people.
Go work in the corporate world like I did for like 10 years, and like you like cannot take 2 steps down a hallway without seeing somebody who's not healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a symptom. And that's a symptom of a couple of different things. But one of the biggest things is the environment that does not facilitate mental and physical health. And this goes back to the topic of this conversation here, which that is one of the huge costs of the paycheck you're earning. Because a lot of people, they just, unfortunately, they just look at that paycheck. They're like, I'm earning, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, dude, but what is it costing you to earn that? It's costing you, I bet you, so much more to earn that than you're getting in return. And once again, it's nothing wrong with the field. Oftentimes it's nothing wrong with the field, although some people do pick the wrong field. Oftentimes it's just the environment, this conversation, the corporate environment, that how they force you to express that that kind of passion of yours. And force is a strong word. No one's forcing anyone. This isn't like a military contract, for example. You could always walk out any single day, no one's forcing you to stay there, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of times just people don't have the confidence also to go out on their own or to set healthy boundaries as well. And they don't have that confidence and self-esteem necessary to really demand that their core values be reflective of their work. But that's kind of like a completely another conversation.
Yeah, well, and like that's like kind of like the thing for me is like I finally decided like enough is enough. Like I don't need to live in like the most expensive, like nicest place in Orange County, California. It's like kind of like got sucked into that, and like corporate world kind of like promoted that for me.
Yeah, and
it was just kind of like there's literally like this whole other world like that's out there like for you to explore, like where you don't need to like be a part of like any of that.
Exactly. And there is
if it's not serving you, like don't serve it.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you like land that house, for example, or whatever, and you're very like obese, you're chronically fatigued, you're under high amounts of anxiety, it feels like there's a knife to your throat 24/7. It's like, dude, like you're not going to enjoy that. You're just coming home like extremely exhausted, fatigued, and angry to enjoy 4 hours before you go to sleep and probably have shitty sleep on top of that, just to return back to that vicious cycle of pathology. And
and I mean, geez, 4 hours before sleep, that's like a lot.
Yeah, like I always tell people, like, hey, your body repairs itself physically from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and it repairs itself mentally from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And a lot of people are like, well, I go to sleep at like midnight, for example. And I'm like, well, okay, cool. Now you're just losing, almost like 14 hours of physical repair time per week, every single week, all year round. And you wonder why that low back pain is never healing, or why you feel chronically tired, which of course, if you're under chronic fatigue or poor sleep, your perception of stress is amplified. It all of a sudden, like if it really was like a 2 or 3 out of 10 on the stress scale, all of a sudden it becomes like a 6 out of 8 when you're in a state of chronic fatigue where you become very myopic, et cetera, et cetera. So it has like a huge ripple effect. And once again, it's totally normalized in this environment. It's totally normal. You see it.
Oh, it's completely normalized. I remember like the top person in our department, he had a heart attack for working too hard. And like, instead of like everybody being like, oh, well, he shouldn't be working so much, they were like, oh my God, look at how hard he worked. Like he worked himself into a heart, and it's like, why are we like applauding that?
Yeah, it's like I say, sick people cannot make healthy decisions. Yeah, they're sick. They're just not doing well physically or mentally. And I know a lot of people are going to listen to this and they're like, oh, Eugene's like exaggerating, full of BS. Not exaggerating. They're just not doing well physically or mentally, and they just happen to be living that way for so long. It's been normalized, and I think that is the normal state of human nature, where it's not normal. It's full of pathology, and they're just not doing well. And once again, you can just look up, metabolic health studies on pubmed.gov, or just, if you're not into studies, screw it, just go outside, look around, okay? Go to any corporate office and just look how like haggard, stressed out, obese, full of disease oftentimes people look in that environment. And results speak for themselves, okay? That kind of level of pathology just doesn't arise from healthy people. And you see that very, very often in
And I mean,
that
I
environment.
even like saw like, a couple cases like where people looked really healthy.
Mhm.
And I had two coworkers that used to run marathons, and both of them ended up dying while working for that company. And it turned out like that there was still some heart issue, and the only like reason that they were able to come up with was stress.
Yeah, and
And
a lot
these
of
were people that ran marathons.
Well, actually, it's a very good point. So a lot of times people from those environments do try to work out. And that seems like a good idea on the surface. And for a small minority of people, it might be a good idea. But the problem is you need to, in order, working out takes energy. It doesn't give you energy. So if your energy is very poor and you're running on adrenal fatigue and just very poor sleep, very poor, highly inflammatory diets, very overweight, probably the last thing you need to do is do tough workouts, especially like in this example that you brought up, long distance running, which is going to spike your cortisol like through the roof and actually put a tremendous amount of more stress on your body. So a lot of these corporate workers, they go to CrossFit at night, and this like bad idea from a myriad of different perspectives, but they're extremely exhausted. They pound an energy drink. They get this workout in, which spikes their high intensity, like beat down workout in, which spikes their cortisol through the roof, actually plummeting their central nervous system body further into decay, not actually helping them at all. And then you have this kind of passive tissue creep from sitting all day, which kind of stretches out your ligaments and tendons and joints. And then all of a sudden you're prone to way more injury, like a lot of people don't know. But sitting all day combined with weightlifting actually dramatically increases your chance of injury, not decreases. I would even argue that just sitting all day and not working out is probably just better for your joint health than sitting all day and then going and doing a tough like barbell deadlift and barbell squat workout at night at a local CrossFit. I would say just the guy that's not working
Yeah,
out
where
is
it's
probably doing better for his
like
body.
it's like I'm a big believer in like the standing desk.
Yep. Yeah. So
Like it's like you're not meant to sit all day and like stare at a computer. And this was like something like you had helped me out with. Like I remember when we were working out together, which was just like my posture, because like I didn't have a sitting desk like when we were working out. Like I had a standing desk, but like I would still like hunch my shoulders.
mhm.
And so I remember like when we were working out, like I like learned like more proper posture for like how to like hold my shoulders back, and just like it just like built like a better core.
Yep.
Like
Y- Yeah, and that's just another one of those indirect costs. Like what is that paycheck costing you, And most of the time it's like, man,
yeah.
even if you want to work out, you really can't at the end of the day. With the amount of, because I mean, I think you would be able to if you did it like part-time, like for the amount of stress and work people are under these days, like for one day of work, they would need to take 2 days off to recuperate, to have their central nervous system
Yeah.
recuperate properly. And these days you have people going like back to back to back to back to back, and they're getting like just super overweight, have super like terrible levels of anxiety, depression, anger, and they go to their physician or their psychiatrist or whatever. And I rarely, if ever, just hear people, these like professionals, suggest that like, hey man, you just need to get in an environment that facilitates health conscious living. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It's just there's
Instead there's a pill for that.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't know why they're so reluctant to suggest like, hey man, you can't be working like 50, 60 hours a week in this kind of toxic environment, in this super high paced environment. If you
Yeah,
want to
'cause
be
that's
mentally
where,
and
like, I
physically
think, like,
healthy.
the whole, like, systemic problem, it's bigger than, like, just, like, the corporate work system, but, like, it's kind of, like, been built into, like, our society. Like,
Exactly.
where this is, like, expected, like, this is normal, and it shouldn't be considered normal. Like, people should not be treating themselves this way, like, and, like
Exactly. I was gonna say
one of, like, my main motivations for getting out of it, like I've told you before, like, was my son, because I refused to be a bad example for him.
yep,
Like, I don't want him to, like, grow up thinking that it's normal to treat yourself, your body, like your mental health that way. Like, I want to see him, like, see both his father and his mother, like, treating their bodies and their mind, and getting enough sleep, and just, like, doing things to, like, promote our health, like, in a more positive light, because I want better for him than what the system's promoting.
exactly. And touching on the parents, oftentimes I do hear people say like, well, I have a corporate job because of my kids. And you hear this often, but there are two negatives to this and two questions I would like the person to ask themselves is one, oftentimes, like personally, what I find out after questioning these people for a while is that uh, most of the time they use their kids as like a scapegoat to avoid dealing with the fear they have anyway. So it's like they would have gotten that corporate job because they're afraid to go do something else to begin with, but now they're using this excuse as like having a kid and having to pay for the kid, which objectively on the surface seems reasonable. But they're using it to kind of stay in that kind of environment and hide from their fear and not deal with that, and kind of using that as justification. And like you said beautifully, like you communicate to your kids from like what you do, not just verbally. So when they see you kind of becoming like very overweight, not setting healthy boundaries at work, dealing with a lot of BS you don't want to deal with, you are communicating that to them, that that is okay. And I've seen it time and time again. Just the kids end up being exactly the same way, and then like, what's the point of like accomplishments or life when you're just like miserable, you're very sick at the end of the day. And remember, you can only give as much love and energy as you have. So that is going to impact everyone around you negatively as well. So it's just,
Yeah. No, that was, like, completely, like, my turnaround point, like, my final breaking point. Like, there were, like, a few other, like, kind of, like, chips in the surface, but my final breaking point was, like, when I had my son. I was like, I am not going to, like, live and be the bad example. I,
yeah,
like, want to, like, show him through my actions, like, that this is, like, a better way to live, you
yeah,
know? And he can, like, follow, like, whatever passions, like, he has, but, like, I don't want to, like, see him, like, ever, like, killing himself over a job to, like, a point, like, where it's, like, actually, like, harming him. And, it's like, if I was, like, one of, like, I could go back into, like, corporate world, and I could completely make, like, so much more money than, like, what I am now. But at the same time, it's like, what would I be teaching him? Like, I would literally be teaching him that, like, you don't have to take care of yourself. Like, you don't have to, like, worry about your mental health. You don't have to worry about, like, your physical well-being. And I like want all of those things to be like a concern for him. Like I want him to know that like both his mom and dad like completely like stand by those things. And yeah, it's like it's very, very important to me to like show that as an example. And I won't like ever use them as an excuse for like having to go back and like completely like sell my soul.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah, and to touch on a few things you mentioned. So first, there are like two really good books regarding financing. It doesn't have to be like A or B. You could always just make great. One of my friends, Jerry, mentioned like, if you're getting paid this much to work in an environment you don't love, imagine how much you would be able to make to work in an environment doing something you do love in an environment that you love as well. Okay. And it doesn't have to be two different worlds. If money is like a core value of yours, and it should be to a certain degree because we're all living in monetary society, of course. There are two great books that had a big impact on me. One of them, I forgot the author, but it's a very, very popular book. It's called like The Millionaire Next Door. And he mentioned some obvious things, which I was already doing, like, but not so obvious things. Like, for example, now this book was written, keeping in consideration that this book was written, I believe, in the 1990s or something of that sort. But he mentioned like actually most millionaires in the US aren't like physicians, aren't lawyers. They're actually just blue collar workers that make somewhere between like 80 to 110,000 a year. And those are most millionaires in the US. And he mentions like one of the biggest things, it's been a while since I read it, so give me some credit here. But one of the biggest things is he always mentioned that first and foremost.
Yeah, it's like my next door neighbor though, by the way, plumber.
Oh yeah, so there you go. You're millionaire next door. But he mentioned one of the biggest things is usually most always these millionaires live in a community that's one class below of what they could afford. So let's say they could afford, like a high class house.
My next door neighbor did.
But they live in a middle class neighborhood and vice versa, from middle class to lower class neighborhood. They most always buy like used cars or have one car per family. And they never wear like luxury clothing ever. In fact, when you see them on the street, you would think they're just like not doing that well financially at all. They're not like very flashy at all. And once again, it's been so long since I read this book, so I forgot a lot of it. But that was they live a very frugal lifestyle, and they don't make that much. I mean, it's an okay salary, but it's not like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, which at least I thought you needed to make to be a millionaire, but it's not the case. They make a very modest salary of like 80 to like $110,000. Most always work like a blue collar job, like nothing like super quote unquote prestigious, although I think they are very important jobs in society, such as you mentioned, like the plumber, construction worker, et cetera, et cetera. The essential jobs,
Yeah,
stuff we actually
like what I've personally, just from like living like off grid here and like the people that like have made money here, it's like they're plumbers, they're locksmiths, like they have like good jobs, but they don't live above their means. And it's kind of like what my husband and I have been doing. It's like I don't like go shopping for clothes anymore. Like that's what I did when I was like in Orange County. Like to be honest, I used to be like total clothes whore, like just buying clothes and shoes and all this like designer stuff. And ever since like I moved out here, it's just like, no, I don't need it. All I need is like a pair of Uggs, like during the winter to keep my feet warm during the summer, because like I'm living in the high desert during the summer. I need like a nice pair of sandals.
Mhm.
I need some bicycle shorts during the summer, and I need pairs of sweatpants during the winter. And I can make by and, take care of like all the stuff I need to and do all the things that like make me happy. Like I'm not like about living anymore to like make other people happy. Like now I'm like more about like living to, do right by my family and to make myself happy.
Exactly. And just right there, you're already, I feel like, way ahead of like 99% of people, because what a lot of people don't understand, although it sounds contradictory on the surface, is that I always tell people, like, in anything that you want to last long term, whether it be like a romantic relationship or a career, like a job, you have to, it is a must for you to have your needs met first. That's
Yes.
huge. And you have to be selfish there. I know it sounds weird, but here's why. And you already know this, Megan, but for the listener,
No, no,
here's,
no. It doesn't even sound weird at all to me, but go ahead.
yeah, exactly. It's so pivotal and so important, because if you don't have your needs met first, what ends up happening all the time, especially in regards to our conversation here, is you most always grow disgruntled to the work. So for example, let's say um, your first year or two of being a lawyer, it's great, their prestigious title, but in the back of your head, you want to be working like 3 days a week and deal with a certain type of clientele on a certain type of with a certain type of clientele and certain type of legal cases. But your law firm is giving you these other projects and making you work basically 6 days a week. It's really 7 days a week, because on the seventh day, you still got to prep for the next week, et cetera, et cetera. And for a little while, it's okay. And they always incentivize you by pumping more money your direction, the golden handcuffs, what's referred to. But what ends up happening over the long term is eventually you'll be like, well, I want to be doing this. And that little voice inside of you says, I want to be doing this way, but I have to do this. And that voice, if you don't listen to it in the beginning, it always starts off as very small. It just gets louder and louder and louder over the years. And then it starts manifesting itself into various symptoms, such as basically low-grade chronic stress, low-grade theory of chronic stress I'm kind of referring to here. It starts manifesting itself in various symptoms: stress eating, which leads to unwanted weight gain, gut issues, high blood pressure, because your immune system is basically suppressed through way too much exposure to low-grade chronic stress, followed by high peaks of chronic stress. Your chances of cancer go up through the roof. And right now, like almost 60% of Americans develop cancer within their lifetime, and half of those die from it. And that's
crazy.
extremely serious. And probably in the next, 50 years or so, or probably be 50 to 100 years, probably be 100% of Americans will develop cancer within their lifetime. It's definitely headed in that direction. And once again, it's totally normalized. People don't even see it. It completely goes under their radar. It's completely normal. They blame their genetics. And it's just so sad to see that. And, 1 out of every few hundred or few thousand cases, it is truly genetics. But the bulk majority of it is just through poor mismatch of just lifestyle, nutritional, and environmental choices that are leading to these ridiculous levels of, like, for example, like almost 900,000 Americans die every year from heart attacks alone. It's like, what the hell? That's like so easy to avoid in like literally almost all the cases. And the fact that almost 1 million are dying every single year just from that alone, and it's just getting worse, is like freaking stupid. It's like ridiculous. It's like totally okay too. Like, where are the government mandates there, to control that? Or like 100,000 Americans die every year from type 2 diabetes alone. It's like, dude, that's like so easy to manage. Like, for example, I had a client come in.
Yeah. Like, I just like told you earlier, it's like my dad was able to like manage it like literally through diet alone.
Exactly. And I had a client actually like a few months ago that's
just like completely like changed his diet.
Exactly. Yeah. And oftentimes that literally, on the surface, that literally all that needs to happen. Like, for example, I had a client come in a few months ago, and he's been on metformin, the type 2 diabetes medication, for who knows how many years. And literally all I had to do was just suggest that he decrease his sugar intake. And he was off of it in a month and a half. Like, how ridiculous is that? Like, where's this freaking physician with those suggestions, you know? Which brings back my point when you mentioned about the doctors and stuff like that, your point a little while back, I'm hinting back at that. Dude, I've never seen more like physically ill or mentally not well group of people than doctors and nurses. You just go to any one of their like medical conventions, or you go to any hospital, and all of them are overworked. They have shitty diets. It's so comical when I see doctors and nurses on high blood pressure medication. It's like, dude, like, do you know, like literally
Like, you know
anything about like health, you know? That's just ridiculous. And I'm like, man, talk about like blind leading the blind. And there is a place and time. I feel that the medical community really does excel when it comes to emergency medicine. If you get in a car accident and you break your arm, that's the place to go, you know? But the fact that, you know, there's
But
so,
like for long-term care, for like things like when it comes to like high blood pressure, diabetes, like
in short, Megan,
anything like that, I completely agree with you.
in short, when it comes to actually being mentally and physically healthy, in my opinion, I highly doubt like anyone in the medical community would help you, because most of them are just not mentally and physically well themselves. There are a few
They'd
exceptions.
rather just give you a pill.
Exactly. And you will never, ever, ever find happiness, health, well-being in a drug. It is a drug. A lot of people call it like medicine, but it is a drug.
Like, same thing, like even for me, like where, you know, I like think about like with like the anti-anxiety medications and stuff they've like prescribed me in the past. It's just like, it doesn't fix like the issue. It's still just like a Band-Aid.
It's kind of like what my friend Jator Pierre would say. You have a rock inside of your shoe, and instead of taking the rock out to walk pain-free, you keep the rock there, but you continue to take pain medication, you know?
Yeah.
How stupid is that? And that's exactly what that model is. It's ridiculous. And I think
for me, like when, you know, I like started getting prescribed like anxiety medication, like it's like, okay, well, I will take your anxiety medication for a while, but like then like I started like counseling, like to, you know, try to like form like a better relationship with like my anxiety and get like a better handle on it. And like a lot of it like had to do with like a lot of the stuff we talked about, like just creating like a better relationship like with myself, and understanding like what my boundaries needed to be like with work and also like people, you know. But it like, it's honestly like, it's the only like solution really, is to like actually like ignore kind of like, maybe you could like take the Band-Aid for a little bit, but at the same time, like you still have to fix the core issue, or else it's always going to be there. The rock's always going to be in your shoe if you don't remove it.
I think one of the bigger issues for a lot of the people, Megan, is the fact that if they want to get to the etiology of the problem and really fix it, they'll realize that they can't continue to work the way they work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of very scary for most people, because they don't have an answer of how to get out of that. So they have this medical system that totally facilitates that philosophy of not wanting to look in the mirror and admitting that.
But like the thing is like, you're never going to get a clear answer though of like getting your way out of it. Like you just have to get out of it. And then you have to figure out what your next steps are going to be.
Exactly. And yeah, I want to talk about that next step with you right after I mentioned this important fact, which a lot of people just don't understand for the most part, or do understand but don't want to admit to it. And that's one thing about corporate work that makes optimizing your health very, very, very difficult is just the central nervous system hasn't evolved to be able to deal with the amount of with the way stress is imposed in that kind of environment. So let me explain. So first and foremost, I mean, pre-farming domestication of animals and crops roughly 10,000 years ago, we're all basically just hunters and gatherers. And our immune system, or not immune system, but our central nervous system for the most part has evolved just to deal with short but extreme levels of stress, followed by valleys of literally nothing going on for a long time. So for example, you hunt a lion with your tribe, it's obviously super stressful. Maybe the lion even killed one person in your tribe. There is stress there, but then you kill it, or you kill some other big animal, and then you have meat for a while. And for a few weeks, let's say it's winter or whatever, somewhere in Europe, and you're able to store the meat for a few weeks, for a few months, there's nothing that goes on. You're like fishing, you're hanging out in the forest, in the natural elements all the time, under the sun, drinking fresh spring water, socializing, sleeping quite a bit, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you go out for another hunt. It might be dangerous for a little bit. And then once again, nothing happens for a while. But the problem with the corporate environment is that you're basically on full blast of low-grade chronic stress combined with high-grade chronic stress. So you always have like this looming deadline around the corner. You always have the social politics and bureaucracy. You have the long hours, lack of sleep, highly inflammatory foods. You have this kind of father-child relationship with the upper management, which causes a lot of people stress, stuff of that sort. And then you have, the deadline, maybe you get an argument with your coworker, then that high levels of peak stress. And just the central nervous system has not evolved to deal with that kind of stress. And then I'm not even counting the stress of getting on the freeway to drive to work, drinking coffee, getting back home, et cetera, et cetera. You can see what a disaster this is. And I hate to sound negative, but there's just no way of being healthy, being exposed to that kind of low-grade chronic stress followed by peaks of high-grade chronic stress, at least not that I've seen. There might be a small exception here and there where you just happen to win the genetic lottery, and also just all these other things in your life happen to be working well for you. And there is maybe one out of a few hundred or one out of a few thousand people that could thrive doing that. But just at the end of the day, most central nervous systems haven't evolved to function that way. And they do break down.
Yeah, I would still question though, like if somebody like said that they were happy doing that they were actually happy doing that.
Yeah,
Just
that's
'cause,
another
like that
thing. So.
like what you said, I think like evolution like takes like a long time, and we have not evolved to like the point like where we're meant to take on like the challenges that are offered our way. Like our brains just are not wired for it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it's just cognitive dissonance. Once again, the person just either has been in that cycle of pathology for so long, they have normalized it and don't know any better, or they just don't know how to escape from it. So they begin to justify why it's right for them to begin with. But you can see it in a person, lack of health, excessive body weight, anxiety, all these things, they're just like symptoms of lack of health. There's just like resonate. So it's just, those things don't just happen when you're healthy and doing well and happy in your life. And like I mentioned, there are a myriad of reasons why that happened, but one of the bigger pillars of that is the topic of this conversation. That's landing in an environment that doesn't facilitate mental and physical health well, such as most corporate environments, for example. But also I've seen it many times in military and police departments also. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, well, let's talk about, I want to cover your transition out. How was your last day when you were walking out that door? What was going through your mind? How are you feeling that day?
So when I first walked out, I didn't know that I wasn't coming back. But basically, like I was like, I'm gonna go have myself an adventure. And I kind of expected to go back into that corporate world. And then I fell in love with Death Valley. And then later on, after falling in love with Death Valley, then I found my husband. Like, I'd met him at the beginning of like seeing Death Valley, but didn't know I was like in love with him yet. And I'd had enough savings and stuff put in place. So I just like kind of like took a year for myself. And it was pretty much like when I found out I was pregnant, I knew I was never going back. And like a lot of that came from like just like the fact that like I have to live like a better life for my son. Like, I can't show him that this is like your only option. I need to show him that there's like something better out there for you. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like, I don't care like what he chooses to do with his life. You know, he could honestly like end up being an engineer, but like I just like want to know that he realizes that there's so much more to life than like just selling your soul to a corporation, because that's kind of like what I got to see like through my parents, you know, like and I mean like I appreciate like my parents like so much, so you know I'm not saying anything bad about them, but it's like I saw like my dad just like working himself like into the ground like constantly, and I thought that that was like going to be like my way to go, like my way to like prove myself. And I don't want my son to like have that like same feeling as he grows up.
Well,
And
how
so that's like, yeah, so that's like basically like where I came from. And also, like, the other thing too was I also wanted my son to like see his mom like taking care of herself, because like the one thing like I've realized like too, and you've touched on this, is it's like if you're not taking care of yourself, like you can't take care of anything else or anybody else, you know, like, so yes, like he is a baby, and it like might seem like contradictory to just be like, okay, like I should completely like make him like my entire priority, but the whole thing is like I can't take care of Teddy, like that's my son's name, but I can't take care of Teddy if I'm not taking care of Megan.
Mhm.
And so that was like a whole other like just complete like stopgap for me, as far as like I cannot go back to how things were.
Well, how's your current living situation? I know you're kind of like semi off grid right now. Can you describe kind of what you have on your land and kind of how just your day-to-day life?
Yeah, so right now, semi upgrade. Right now, my husband, he is working, but he's working a job that he loves. He works up in Death Valley. So shout out to Panamint Springs. Highly recommend it to anybody. But like I pretty much take care of like we have goats, chickens, dogs, cats. I take care of more than like 30 plus animals like every day. And we're gonna like start selling more eggs this year, because we're about to get another 30 something chickens. And like I'm kind of getting to explore like other passions that I've had, and I've also like left like the whole window open for possibly going back like to do some programming work, because like I said, like I did enjoy it, but kind of like my angle going forward with continuing potential like further work is I want to like work like contract jobs where I can like set my own hours. If I do decide to, like, we're still not 100% sure if like that's like the right thing for us. But if we do decide like that's the right thing for us, it's like I'm just gonna do contracts jobs. Because I'm not ever going to work more than 40 hours a week, and 40 hours a week is kind of like pushing it. Because I already like work like so much at home. Like it takes like a lot to, take care of like all these animals, and we're about to order some emus even. So
What are you going to do with those guys?
we're gonna breed them and lay eggs.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Are you ever do you hunt out there at all, or?
Like an emu egg is about the equivalent of 10 chicken eggs.
Oh, damn. I might have to order like a few from you then
Yeah.
to buy so many eggs then. Do you hunt out there at all?
Yeah,
Or?
and I mix like all of, like my chicken food too, so we're soy and corn free.
Nice. Cool. That's what I volunteered at happy-hens.com. Highly recommended. They sell their eggs in Southern California at Whole Foods locations and like a few other locations, but they're also soy and corn free, which is very rare, and also USDA organic certified, like a planned grazing rotational chicken operation, which is really cool. So
Yeah,
that's cool.
I can't get certified because I use kelp in their chicken feed.
Mhm.
And it's hard to find certified organic kelp.
Are you hunting out there at all? I know you have like a history in
Yes.
hunting already. You are?
Yeah, yeah.
What do
I
you,
do hunting. So mostly jackrabbit.
what are the rules out there?
My
Can you just
family
like,
also has a cat.
what are the rules out there? Can you just kind of walk out
Oh, you can
outside
hunt
in?
jackrabbits any time of the year.
Can you just, I mean, what are the rules in terms of just shooting a rifle anywhere?
Right across the street from where my husband and I live is a ton of BLM land.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, so like we can just shoot it up on the BLM land, and then as it turns out, our we have a Labrador, German Shepherd, and Alaskan Malamute mix, and she is quite the little hunter all on her own. She likes to bring us home some treats sometimes. So she's brought us home chucker, and she's also brought us home a jackrabbit.
Damn, Megan, you're like blowing up with the animals. I had a hard time just watching over one German Shepherd and two cats. Yeah, like 200 animals plus a kid.
Oh, I know. No, like it's crazy. Like
Yeah.
honestly though, like the one like I have the hardest time with, so all of our chickens right now are girls, but apparently if you buy like all female chickens, like if you have over 12 of them, one of them will turn into the rooster.
Oh,
And
nice.
they'll even grow that like back talon. And so our female that ended up becoming the rooster, she tries to attack me.
Oh, interesting. I never even knew that.
She's the one that like gives the like most hell out of any of our pets.
Huh,
And I keep telling her, like she gets me like too bad, like she's gonna become rooster soup.
Yeah, I never even knew that. I remember there's like, I don't know, hundreds of hens in that happyhens.com ranch I volunteered at. I don't remember any of them doing a transformation into a rooster, you know. But that'd be
Yeah,
interesting.
no, it's a thing. Like I can send you like a page on it. Yeah, usually if you have over 12 girls, like one of them will turn into a rooster.
Gotcha. You got to balance
Because
out that testosterone to estrogen
they have to
ratio,
have
man.
somebody that's like, yeah, they have to have somebody that's out there like looking after the flock.
Hmm. Do you what portion of your, I guess, like calories do you get from hunting those jackrabbits? Or is that just kind of like some part-time thing?
Um, so right now it's part-time, but once so we're working on getting my car fixed up because I have a nice four-wheel drive V8 4Runner, and it can like really get back into some of those hills. After that, like it's jackrabbit season.
Got it. Yeah, I'm starting with
But yeah, like we get like a good portion though still, because I did win a couple skeet shooting contests, so I'm a very good hunter, especially with my shotgun.
I we might have to set up a trip together sometime. I just finished like
Yeah,
my
I would love that.
just finished my rifle certification like last weekend, and I'm starting with a hunting mentor like mid-March. So we're starting off with learning how to kind of like find, kill, and process wild boars, like I told you before. I'm kind of a noob to the whole scene at the moment, but luckily I got a good base with already being in shape and all that stuff. So just need to learn the actual skill of hunting.
Yeah, I'll have to send you. So I'll have to send you the meat eater episodes though of
I've been watching
when they
some
were
of them.
hunting wild boar.
I've been watching
Okay,
some
you
of them
have.
since you mentioned it. Yeah. Um, I,
Yeah,
I remember Joe Rogan mentioning it a couple times in his show. So after you mentioned
yeah,
it, I'm like, oh, I'll just finally check it out. And I already watched like a few episodes on YouTube.
yeah. No, it's Steve Ranella is like he's the best. Like, and if you ever get a chance to like read any of his books, it's just like the way he talks about hunting. Yeah, it's just like all next level. It's like you have way more of an understanding for an animal, like as somebody that hunts an animal than you like, or well, way more respect and just like love for an animal than like even if you are a vegan. And that's like being completely honest as somebody who is a former vegan of 8 years.
I think you're like a
'Cause,
vegetarian when you started training with me, right? The first time, or no?
I was for like the first 2 weeks.
Okay, because I think I
Yeah.
talked you
And I
into,
wasn't just vegetarian, I was vegan.
or vegan. I think like, was it me that mentioned that you should incorporate more meat into your diet?
Yeah, it was, and I'd already been thinking about it because like I love fishing, and then I decided like basically like the way like I decided like whether I was gonna like stop being vegan or not was I was like if I can hunt it myself, like skin it and process it and do it all myself, like that's like a really like honest relationship with the meat that I'm eating,
Mhm.
and I'm comfortable with that. And I
Yeah.
was like, if I can do that, then I'm comfortable eating meat.
I,
But I had to like get comfortable like with having an honest relationship with my food. And
yeah.
that's actually like everything like I am about. Like even on like the ranch, it's like, it's like my chickens, my goats, like everything. It's like I like to have like an honest relationship with like anything that might be my food. And like granted, I don't eat my chickens or goats, but it's like I like to have that sort of connection. And so once I started hunting was when I finally felt comfortable with the possibility of eating meat again.
Got it.
And that was like after 8 years of being vegan.
What do you, I was thinking of also like trying to get into like rain harvesting, which is like pretty easy to do. And, like I found like just 1,000 square foot roof for every 1 inch of rain can help gather about like 500 gallons of water. So I was like, oh man, you could just gather that and just run it through like a Berkey water system, for example. And you can have like really
Yeah.
solid drinking water, like very high quality water that you don't get from the tap, because from the tap you also get like runoff for various pharmaceutical drugs, unfortunately, that a lot of the processing
Yeah,
plants just
unfortunately.
don't filter out, and that kind of
Well,
makes it into your
actually, I
water.
don't, I don't, because we pump ours out of the ground.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying like, have you ever thought of doing the rain harvesting thing? Is that a possibility in your area?
Yeah, actually, I have. This year was like the first year like I thought about it because the year before we got about 2 inches of rain. The year before that we got about 2 inches of rain. This year we got about 20 inches of rain.
Oh, damn. So yeah, you can gather who knows how many thousands gallons of water a year just off that.
Yeah. There it's like it's kind of like maybe like once every 3 years that we get like good amounts of rain. But yeah, like the one good thing about like where we live is we don't have to worry about pharmaceuticals in our water because we're literally directly like pumping our water out of the ground. The only chemicals that like get added into our water are stuff that like we put in.
Got it. Yeah, I always wondered with like
And I'm like I'm the new water czar no, so
yeah, I always wondered like usually if you use like distilled water on crops, like the crop doesn't grow as well. But rainwater is kind of like distilled water, but rainwater actually makes crops grow really well. So I was thinking like maybe there's just more nitrogen in the rainwater, which is one of the main macronutrients that plants need to grow. But I was always curious like why that was the case. I'm like, well, if you give them distilled water, it doesn't grow that well. There was distilled water or water from like a reverse osmosis machine because all the nutrients have been sucked out. But then again, if you give them rainwater, um, which is basically kind of like distilled water, it does grow really, really well. So do you know anything about that? I was always wondering, never really reached out for anyone
yeah,
to
no, I'm
ask.
not sure. Like I do know two things that we're doing for our garden this year is I've set up a system to give them compost kombucha basically.
Okay. That's what we used on
So
when I volunteered at Bluebird Canyon Farms. There's some kombucha plant
yeah, and
that
then
was
the
just giving us tons
other
of
thing
compost.
that I'm doing, instead of using like all of my extra bones and carcasses for bone broth, I am making bone meal, which should provide phosphorus. I believe. I believe that's what it does for the soil. But yeah, it should provide phosphorus for the soil.
Got it.
Because like up here in like the high desert, it's like you don't have a lot of nutrients like naturally in the soil. So like everything like that you're doing is like stuff you're putting into it. So in addition to like our normal like compost pile, like what I've been doing like out in the front of our house is I've been doing like this like kind of like spread of like little compost piles
Mhm.
to like help grow like fruit and nut trees because pistachios apparently grow really well in the area because like we have pistachio fields like right across the way from our house. So
Got
that's
it.
like kind of like been in the works and uh basically like according to my like math like I have to get broccoli, lettuce, Brussels sprout, like spinach, like all of that stuff, like started indoors from seedlings, like probably around February 6th. So like about 4 days, and then transfer them outside like a few days later into like some like raised beds. But we have like plenty of compost because I've been collecting it now for like 2 years.
Yeah, once I got back into like doing gardening and stuff, I was reminded of like how intensive it is to even grow like just a little bit of vegetables, which is kind of why I started kind of researching hunting more. Because I'm like, man, farming, like, I mean, obviously, if you
It's a
have,
lot of work.
yeah, it's a lot of work. And I guess if you have a lot of land, you can do kind of a rotational plan grazing. Like if you get a good system set up, it's not too bad after you get it set up. But I'm like, man, it's still like pretty intensive. And with hunting, I feel like always on the back of my head, like nature is the best farmer around. And
Oh yeah, for sure.
it's like the product is already complete, you know? All you got to do is like harvest it and everything. So I was like, oh, you know, this might be an easier alternative than to farming, and just kind of, you can do a little farming set up as like a supplement to your food, but mainly rely on kind of what you hunt and stuff. Have you ever got into like wild crop foraging?
Yeah, I've done like a little bit of that, like mostly mushrooms.
Hmm.
But like I've done like a few like wild crop foraging, like kind of expeditions. But yeah, it's been mostly like focused on mushrooms.
Got it.
No, not magical mushrooms,
Yeah.
just regular
I'm like, oh man,
mushrooms.
regular ones are too regular. Well, Megan, well, let's kind of go back. Let's say, you know, at UCI, they have career fairs all the time for seniors recently graduating. Let's say you had like a booth set up there and you had some, you know, seniors coming up to you. They're like 21, 22. They're about to get into the workplace. They're probably thinking like, I just want like a high paying, prestigious job. So I'm kind of valued in society or whatever, and I have security, and they're not evaluating, you know, the cost of earning that. Like, what would you, if they came up to you, what would you tell them?
Run.
Run. Hopefully in the right direction,
No, but
you know.
no, but like honestly, like I would tell him like it's like don't believe like the hoopla, you know? It's like these companies are good at what they do. They're good at selling the jobs to like the good programmers. Problem is, like you said, it comes with like a great cost to like your health, your mental well-being, and you really like have to like start evaluating like how that can like affect your like life and mental well-being.
Hmm.
And I also would say to them like probably like have you explored anything else too? Because I don't think when you're 21 or 22 that you know what you want to do.
Hmm.
So don't be ready to sell your soul at that age.
Oh, sounds like you got Teddy
Like
waking up.
it's great. Yeah, I
That's
do
okay.
have Teddy waking up. I can actually move.
No, no, it's totally okay. Totally okay.
Oh no, my husband's got him. We just got a messy diaper.
The life of being a mom.
But it's like yeah, but it's like don't just like sell your soul, you know? It's like really figure out like if this is like what's meant for you, you know? Like maybe like take time, like try something out. Like that's perfectly reasonable. But you know, I'm also like kind of as I've gone more off grid, like I have become more of like this big believer in being like the type of person that like you can take care of your household just like as it is. And whether that like means, you know, being able to like fix plumbing or like do car work, you know, it's like really like honestly like think about
Yeah. Yeah. And also
it.
like
Because I think people, especially with computer engineering, get into it for like the prestige of it. And
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I did actually like it. And one like neat thing that I'm like finally going to get to do, it's like I'm working on a project like with my dad to like, start like presenting like problems like over a blog, like, and explain them to like young programmers. And like we're like just starting work on like our first one, but it's like figure out if it's like actually something you like really like doing before like you actually like do it. Like don't just do it because it like sounds like it's like a good thing.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the toughest parts, like Walensky would always say, it's like you don't know who you are until you know who you are not. So oftentimes it's
Yeah.
just like you got to try, and unfortunately for a lot of people, they got to get that corporate job, for example, and listen to their body and their gut and realize maybe for a lot of them down the line that it's not a right fit. And I think the only problem with when it becomes a problem is when people tend to like nest in there instead of kind of using it as like a springboard for like another chapter in their life. They realize it's not a good fit. It's their gut is telling them it's not a good fit. Their body's showing all these symptoms of excessive weight gain, all these mental pathologies that it's not a good fit. But they continue just to stay at for a myriad of reasons, for whatever stories they're telling themselves, and they force themselves to believe it, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of when it becomes a problem. But I would always say like be thankful for things that don't work out, like a relationship that doesn't work out, because that's just the universe giving you more clear answers of what you actually do need in your life, and what you don't want in your life. So you just need to like write that down so you remember, and then go to your next chapter, making sure not to repeat those mistakes. One big thing I see clients make oftentimes is they come in super tired, super unhealthy, super overweight, and we get them into peak shape, and instead of finding that environment, more health conscious environment, they stay in the same job. But worse off, they actually take promotions to increase their responsibilities when in fact they're already overburdened and running on exhaustion even in their lower position. And the majority of the time I see them take on those positions and they regain all their weight within like 2 years. Although I would suggest, finding a new job that has more balance. They don't listen, and they regain all their weight. They become even more sick, even more miserable, and they start those cycles again, and then they go again and again and again. It's the same old story. So,
Yeah, it's like be willing to like listen to your body and mind. Like if something doesn't feel right at a certain point, like you're gonna know it. Like society might not tell you like that you should know it. Like society might like be validating your like position, but if you don't feel good about it, like either physically or mentally, like listen to that. Like listen, your body or your mind is like screaming out for you to help it, and like you have to listen.
Yep. And
like if you want to get better.
Exactly. And over time, it's just going to get louder and louder. So eventually you're going to have to listen to it anyways. And I feel like oftentimes, a lot of times people get into,
or it's like you're either going to have to, or it's going to be too late, and like you don't want it to be that situation like where it's like too late.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And oftentimes I do feel a lot of people get sucked in these positions for the like physical safety of it, like getting the paycheck so they can get that house and get that car and be in that good neighborhood so they're physically safe. But really it's just like in the long term, because of the tremendous amount of like we mentioned, low grade followed by high grade chronic stress, the tremendous amount of mental pathology that breeds into this kind of environment, kind of circles back and actually causes you to be physically unhealthy and well. So remember, the whole point was just to have physical security, at the expense of like your mental well-being, but then it circles back and causes you to be physically unwell, which I mean, like we mentioned many times in this podcast alone, like literally 9 out of 10 people you run into in these environments are not only like unhealthy, they're just like extremely, extremely sick, like mentally and physically. And it might not seem that way on the surface, but it is, because the standards have dropped so low that these like very mentally and physically sick people are seen as normal, when in fact they're not. So
Yeah, or even like the people that seem perfectly like healthy that like are able to run ultra marathons end up like, dropping dead of heart attacks.
Yep. Yeah. So, hopefully,
And like
hopefully,
that was like I had 2 coworkers that like were in that position, not just one, but 2.
yeah. Yeah.
They could have passed any physical by their doctor. And
Yeah.
like neither of them had an underlying like heart condition.
Yeah. And a lot of times those general blood works that people get done, just, I don't think they mean too much at the end of the day. Like I've had people come in with the good blood results, and I see their HAQ, I talk to them thoroughly, and they're just falling apart left and right. So those blood tests mean close to nothing, in my opinion. I mean, there's so many better markers of health than relying on those tests. So in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but I could honestly say I'm healthier than most doctors. So so there's that. And don't go to a person
I
asking
can
for help.
concur with that.
Yeah, don't go to a person asking for health advice when they themselves are not healthy.
Yes.
You'll probably not get the best advice, because it's blind leading the blind in that case.
Yep.
So, all right, Megan. Well, shoot, I enjoyed our conversation for the second time, a tremendous amount.
I did too. Always good talking with you, Eugene.
Yeah, hopefully we could try to hit up Mount Fury again one of these days. Kind of avenge our.
We will conquer it.
Yeah, I know. So close last time, just like 100 yards out or whatever.
No, it's just like it was right there.
Yeah, that's okay. Gives you something to look forward to. So.
Yeah.
All right,
exactly.
Megan. Well, let's stay in touch.
Hey, maybe I'll have Teddy in my backpack this time.
All right. Hey, as long as you're going to be the one carrying him, I'm okay with that, Because I remember I was hurting even last time with barely even carrying anything.
Yeah. Well, he's my little adventure baby. I'll carry him anywhere.
Cool.
He's gonna be hitting up Mount Whitney, not this year, but next summer. He's gonna be up at the top of California, or the top of the lower 48.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's.
And, if you want a good hike in Texas, you got to do Guadalupe Peak.
Yeah, I was thinking of.
The highest,
this year I was kind of
highest peak in Texas.
Yeah, I was kind of looking around for some random stuff to do. This year I'll be a little bit busy with I was planning on doing 2 rifle competitions as well, like AR rifle competitions. Nice. So I'll see, I think with just getting ready for that and then doing the hunting stuff, kind of like set out for the year. But I'm interested to see how you build out your kind of semi off-grid place, and kind of, you always kept me motivated also to keep pursuing that direction and path. So. Aww. Seeing your posts daily, I'm like, I can't just talk about this stuff and encourage other people to do it. I got to do it too, Yeah.
Cool. I hear you.
All right, Megan. Well, good chatting again. Okay.
All right. Yep. You have a good day.
All right, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.